Welcome to the Book Supplied podcast, presented by WSL Leadership. In this podcast, we talk about an awesome book and how to apply it to your work, sport, or life. I'm your host, Iggy Perillo. Thanks for joining me. Today, I am talking about the book Secondhand, Travels in the New Global Garage Sale by Adam Minter. And I am speaking with my very special guest, Julia Williamson. Hello, Julia.
Hi, so nice to be here. Thank you.
I'm excited to have you here. Will you give us a quick overview, summary, short microbiography of your life and times, and maybe tell us what drew you to this book, because I know you're excited about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a little business called Unburdened Life. I help people get rid of their clutter. And a lot of that is the physical clutter, but I also like to help people work on decluttering their calendars and their relationships and their mindset and all that kind of stuff. And I came to this work because I had too much stuff, like everybody in America. And it took a while for me to teach myself how to really live with less and how to get rid of the things that weren't useful to me anymore. And I think it's so much fun that I love doing it with other people.
Fantastic. I'm glad you think that's fun. And I'm sure you have plenty of stories about people who are, obviously they hire you, they know they want to do this, and yet it maybe does not seem so fun to them, I suspect.
Right. I know. Not everybody gets a dopamine hit from putting something in a Goodwill bag, but I seem to.
No, it's great. I think I have. I feel like I've been there at times when you're like, cool. It does. I mean, I love the title, the name of your business, Unburdened. I'm like, oh yeah, I am unburdening myself with these different things.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, so how did you come across this book, Secondhand by Adam Minter? Like, do you remember where it was introduced to you?
Yes, actually, a friend of mine was reading it and lent it to me on Kindle. Did you know you can lend books on Kindle? Oh. It's this crazy thing. So I had it in my possession for a couple of weeks, and then I bought it because I liked it so much. And it really has informed some of the work that I do with my clients, actually.
Fantastic. So like directly useful for your business, for sure. What have you found the most useful or most interesting from this book?
Well, I think one of the things you realize in reading this book is that junk is junk, right? And I think here in the West, we love to think that someone else wants to reuse the stuff that we're done with. But, if it's junk, it's junk. And especially as other parts of the world become more affluent, they don't want our crap. And so I really encourage people to throw things away. And I think that's really hard, especially here in the Northwest, where everybody's so environmentally conscious. No one wants to throw it in the trash, but we got to recognize when trash is trash.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the book does a really interesting job of talking about how the things we used to not export, but basically the things we cast off and think are going to go to a better place because we're not using them, they would go to China, and China would repackage them and send them off to somewhere else, and they would repackage them and send them off to somewhere else. Like basically American goods just sort of trickled down through, countries and continents to sort of maybe get to a final resting place, which was probably a landfill anyways, or it was still trash. Like no one actually wants it, but somehow stuff got, some items get moved literally all over the world because we don't want them anymore. We're using them. Oh, it's, I'm done with this. It still has useful life to it, but in reality, no one wants it.
Yeah, it's amazing, I think, how much American goods end up in landfills in Africa and Asia. Crazy.
Right. And I know one of the things he talks about a little bit that, inspired by this podcast, he talks about books and how we have books that we don't read or we're done reading. We've read them once. It's a physical item. We ship them off. They're like, oh, yeah, someone else might want this book or might need this book. And then there's huge warehouses. They're just piles and mountains of books. And the people going through sorting them are basically, you might have to correct me if I'm getting this not quite right, but some of them are just like into the fire. Like we don't even want this thing anymore. This is not even into the incinerator, and they can see valuable copies of books and valuable, some they can recognize that some have more value than others, but the people sorting aren't allowed to pull out, the more valuable books.
Right.
And those got to the incinerator, to the shop, to the wherever, they just weren't quite, the system didn't quite work how we imagined it would. We're like, oh, someone's going to read this book. It doesn't quite work out that way.
Well, because the volume is just out of control. And that he was talking about a company in Japan that resells books, but only books that are in perfect condition and have ISBN codes on them, because it's not worth it for them to take the time to really examine each one individually, which totally makes sense when you're talking about millions of books.
Right.
But yeah, I think you think, oh, this copy of Peter Rabbit, right? It was really special. So of course some child's going to want that, but it's just never going to get there.
No, not through that system. And I think he sort of talked about this global system, but also there's sort of hyper local systems that I thought was really interesting. Like the people that their job is to be a professional cleaner or a professional, like your type of work where you're like helping people get rid of things. And I know because I've seen this on your website, you're like, here's 20 different places you can recycle things or upcycle things, or, there is a place for some things, but there's not a place for everything.
Right. And I mean, I love the idea of being able to give things directly to the people who want them, which is why I think, these buy nothing groups and Free Cycle and Craigslist are super useful, right? Because I'd rather have someone just drive up to my house, pick up the thing and take it home. No middle people, no in between.
Absolutely. And I mean, and how we price things and value things. It's interesting that you mentioned Buy Nothing plus Craigslist, right? These sort of are two possibilities. I know not everyone's maybe familiar with Buy Nothing groups, but I'm a part of my local one here. And it's a hyper local little group organized on Facebook. So it's literally my neighborhood. It's maybe like 2 or 3 square miles. It's pretty teeny feeling. And you can post things. Hey, I have this extra blender. Who wants it? And someone's like, I want it. And you can give it to your neighbor, like pretty close nearby neighbor. Or you can ask, oh, I need a garden hose. Who has one they're not using? And so on. It's a way to freely exchange things. And there's no money. It's just free. And then there's Craigslist where people are obviously selling things or putting wanted ads like, oh, I want to buy this thing, and someone will sell it to you. So there's definitely a cash sort of system happening on Craigslist. And I think people price things and try to sell things at ridiculous prices sometimes. Like we really value our own things. And I'm sure you see this, that people are really valuing their possessions and yet no one wants them, or at that price, no one wants them. Or because it's special to you doesn't mean it's special to anyone else.
Absolutely. A thing is not worth what you paid for it. A thing is worth what someone else will pay you for it.
Right.
Which are usually very different. And I think that if you paid a lot for something, you tend to think that it holds value. And I read about a study where if you already own a thing, you think it's worth more than if it's sitting on a shelf at a store, right? Just that idea of possession makes things more important to us and makes us feel like they're more valuable. And often I work with people who say, well, I don't want to get rid of this. I want to sell this. And I just say, really, is it really worth your time? You're going to have to take a picture of it and list it and maybe drive it somewhere or ship it somewhere. I mean, are you really going to do that? Maybe you should put it on the curb and see if someone takes it.
Yeah. I've definitely driven around the streets and seen the little free sign. I got a desk that way. I got table. I've gotten all kinds of various things. And some neighborhoods are definitely better than others for free stuff on the corner. Some times of year are definitely better than others. And we both are in Portland, Oregon here, where it's very rainy. So there's definitely wet times. You're like, nope, there's nothing going to be on the curb now. But we actually have some summer months that are sunny that are great for cruising around. You also kind of made me think about sort of the family heirlooms, right, that people have. And I think this book came into my life because the thought of like the parents being like, hey, I've saved all this fine china for you. And the kid's like, what am I going to do with a 16 servings of fine, very delicate china that's going to, I can't put in the microwave. I can't put in the dishwasher. I can't put in the oven. I can't put, I can't sort of live my sort of life that I live with this very delicate china, for example, or fancy spoons and silverware, or the curios of grandma from the homeland. And you're like, what is this junk? I think the kids are seeing this sort of distance with some aging parents, right? Family heirlooms are a really kind of sensitive, dicey topic for some people. I'm wondering how you manage with that. I'm sure you encounter that in your world.
Oh my gosh. I have seen so many garages filled with their people's parents' stuff. Mm-hmm. And I went through this myself. My sisters and I had to clean out our parents' house a couple of years ago after both our parents had died. And my parents had a lot of really nice stuff, but we're all in our 50s. We have houses full of stuff. Mm-hmm. So, in some cases we upgraded. So I took a piece of furniture to get rid of mine because theirs was nicer. And it's hard, right? There's your childhood disappearing in front of you, and it can be really difficult. But I said this to someone the other day, and I think it really struck a chord. I said, look around your house. How many of these things do you want your grandchildren to own? Mm-hmm. Like, is it really important for you that your grandchildren own? And she was like, oh, like none of them.
Oh, yeah. Or, yeah, just looking at where I am now, I'm like, nothing here was grandchild worthy, probably.
Because I think there's this sense of guilt, like this belonged to my mother. So for some reason, I should keep it. My mother was lovely before she died. She said, I don't care what you do with any of it, right? Mm-hmm. Do whatever you want. Throw it all away. I don't care. I don't need it anymore.
Well, that's nice. I like basically unburdened you as the kids, right? That's so great.
Absolutely. But I think a lot of people carry this sense of guilt, like I should want it.
Sure.
But we don't. And I do think, we're having smaller families. In my family, it's gotten smaller and smaller and smaller. I have the only 2 kids in the extended family. And I'm thinking, they're not going to inherit from 27 different people. Yeah. It's not going to be good.
Nope, definitely not.
And then tastes have changed, so sure. He talks in the book about the big brown furniture. Like nobody wants that big brown heavy furniture anymore.
Oh, yeah.
Warehouses full of it across the country, and people just don't want it.
Yeah. And there's this kind of interesting part in the book about the storage of things and the getting rid of things. And getting rid of things, they need to be stored somewhere, and yet no one wants them. But somehow he talks about this as a sort of a shrinking industry in different ways. One part that caught my mind was the sort of rags. Like we have clothing. Oh, great. We can recycle it. It can become a rag, and then it can be used again as like a new product, right? And the people that produce the rags would, source, I think cotton normally, like cotton clothing, not reformat. That's like a really weird way to say that, but basically resize it, maybe slap an edge on it and then sell it as, bundle it up, sell it as a bundle of rags. And the guy who is doing this, I forget his name, but he was like, I can't actually get cotton that's good enough or consistent to make into rags. So now I have to order cotton fabric to be rags. Like I can't even source this. And meanwhile, there's millions and millions of pieces of articles of clothing that are recycled or donated, and people need to pick through all of that, right? And there are people picking through mountains. They describe mountains of clothing or fabric, like the bales of clothing that I think are hundreds of pounds each. People are picking through to try and find the right fabric, the right materials, the right things that can be sold or upcycled or recycled in different ways.
Yeah, and I have to admit, the sweater that I'm wearing right now, once I'm done with it, this is not going to be a rag. It's like half of it is some fake something or other. It's not going to absorb anything. It is garbage after I'm done with it, which makes me feel a little bit guilty, I'm going to admit.
Oh, yeah. He talks about the fleece is killing off the wool and milling industries, but also you can't recycle like a polyester fleece or a synthetic material fleece. They're just not really recyclable. They don't absorb anything. They melt. And you're like, okay, well, yay.
Yeah. One of the things that really struck me in this book is at one point he talks about reduce, reuse, recycle. And it really seems to me that at this point, we're kind of relying on recycle, right? Like we reuse a little bit, some people more than others. Reduce, that's not happening. We're all counting on recycling, and recycling, a lot of stuff just can't be recycled. To my mind, we need to get back to the beginning, which is the reduce. Stop.
Oh, yeah.
Buying it. Just stop.
Yeah. I think that's sort of the takeaway from this book, right? He goes through all these different industries, electronics and fabrics and furniture and books and all these different things. And at the end of the day, you're just like, none of it works perfectly. The recycling system for all of these is a little bit flawed or failing, or it's just like a cover for a landfill, or, or whatever, it's volume to the incinerator. None of them work as well as we want them to be. I think in terms of these items, we think we're recycling a commodity, a thing itself. And reducing would seem to make a lot more sense. And that's traditionally not very American sentiment, right? To reduce our consumption.
No, what are you talking about? Buy.
Right. We're helping by buying somehow.
Yeah, somehow. Well, right. Our governments keep telling us that, right?
Yeah. But he does also mention that other countries are catching up to this sort of idea of that a secondhand thing is somehow inferior to the first quality thing. So that you need your new phone, you need your new device, because if you have an old model, a secondhand, an older, let alone an old model, not even a secondhand model, who are you to have this old phone, the secondhand phone? Do you know anyone who's bought a secondhand phone? I know they're out there. I actually bought one secondhand phone, then it broke, but to replace my phone that I had, because I wanted the exact model and I could find it someone locally selling it on Craigslist, right? But have I Like the next phone I got, was it secondhand? Like I guess I inherited one from my brother, but who does this? The next one I bought a brand new phone. I bought it, you're in a cycle of buying a new thing. And then what do you do with the old one? Try to recycle, I guess.
Right. Well, this is interesting. So I have a phone that I love, and it's an older iPhone, and I love it. And I don't need any extra anything. And I realized that if my phone breaks, because it was kind of acting weird the other day, I want a new phone immediately. I don't want a week. I can't go a week. And I actually thought I should buy a refurbished iPhone 8 today so that when mine breaks, I can make that switch, because for me, it's less about having the new thing and it's more about expediency. Like, right. I want it now.
Yeah, the convenience, right? Yeah. I mean, so many of us use our phone so often for so many things. If we didn't have a phone, I mean, unless we're intentionally not using our phone for a day, a week, whatever, that can be really hard on people in their communication. Just their habits of communication, I'll say. Like we cultivate habits that are dictated by the possessions we own sometimes, but we don't realize we can change our habits and then change our possessions, right? We don't need that habit driven by the possession. We could have a different habit, a different way we go about doing things.
Like, absolutely. I love possible. That. Yes, it totally is possible. I mean, we've changed our sort of national habits from being thrifty to being, what's the opposite of thrifty? Wasteful, I guess. We could go backwards.
Normal, I guess is what we call that, right?
That was another thing that I thought. He talks a lot about sending things like electronics and cars to particularly Africa, I think, where people really are still fixing things. Mm-hmm. And I thought, once upon a time in the US, thriftiness was reusing, was darning your socks and fixing your toaster. And I feel like now people consider themselves thrifty if they're getting a good deal on something or they're getting something for free. And it's more about how you acquire it than how you manage it once you've got it.
Right. That's fascinating. Yeah, I think I like fixing things. I'd rather repair things. And right now I have this hot water kettle, right? It's like a little standalone kettle. And it has a switch and it makes the water hot so you can make your tea and your cocoa and all your things. And it's starting to fail. And so I'm like, maybe we should try and fix this thing. Like there's a way. And doing the research into how to fix this one item, they're everywhere. You can find them all over the place. It's not an unusual item. It's not a crazy brand that you've never heard of. They make the screws, a certain kind of screw that you need a certain bit for. And then they sell no replacement parts, no repair parts. This is the sort of planned obsolescence. Like, this thing should last 2 to 3 years and it's going to poop out on you. Like, cool. Like you get an expensive one, you get a cheap one. It doesn't matter. 2 or 3 years, maybe 4 years if you somehow, are lucky. This item everywhere is going to self-combust. It's going to stop working. The switch is going to fail. Whatever it's going to fail is going to fail. And it's not fixable. Like there's not an easy way. I've looked at tutorials online. I've looked at this. The tutorials online though are very funny. They are from Southeast Asia often, which you can tell by sort of the accent and the so the subtitles even are in different languages sometimes. But I'm like, these people are invested in, repair, fixing things. And where do I find the bit to open the screw to open this thing? Where do I find the part? Or, I don't have the knowledge to fabricate the parts I might need to, fix this thing. It's designed to not be fixable. Like it's intentional. It's 100% intentional, 100% part of the design that when this thing fails in 2 or 3 years, you can't fix it. Here, buy a new one, it's only $20-$30, whatever, buy a new one. Like that's the message and the design of the thing itself.
Yeah, no, it's really messed up. Particularly in electronics. He talks about that, how Apple is constantly coming up with new fasteners that nobody knows how to work. And there was one website, and I don't remember the name of it, but maybe we can look it up. There's a guy who started a website. He has all these volunteers who figure out how to fix things that aren't really fixable. And they even have tools made for those weird little screws and bits and pieces. So they're kind of like always trying to be one step ahead of the manufacturers.
I think it might be called iFix. I think iFixit.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they sell toolkits to help you fix. You can replace the screen on your phone. Like it's really not, rocket science. It's not going to blow up. Like one can do these things if we have the tools, if we have the right fastener, if we have the right thing to open the other thing. And there are ways to get replacement parts, right? Because there's so many people casting off their phone, their thing, their this or that. Like, this one has a cracked screen. This one has a busted plug. Now I have one phone with the right plug and the right screen. Like it is doable. Not so much with my electric kettle though. I'm like, where do I find these? here, like in Portland, to speak specifically, there's this organization called Repair PDX, which a buddy of mine runs, where they teach people how to repair and do repairs. And my friend that runs it, she was like, yeah, people bring in stuff and she's like, we actually just can't fix that thing. Like, there's actually not a way to fix your toaster. There's not a way to fix this, small kitchen appliance often is what people have, because who wouldn't want to fix their toaster? You use it every day. You're like, great, maybe I can fix it. Like, there's not a way, even if you can get into them, you can explore and poke around and learn. You have a couple of them, like you're suddenly doing soldering and like pretty complicated work to try and get parts to work. And then at a certain point, you're like, yeah, maybe I shouldn't be soldering my toaster and like building wiring. Like it's
right.
Maybe there's some electricity involved I shouldn't mess with too bad. And that, yeah. And in the book, I think Minter talks about, there are places where you do repair, where you maintain things and you treat things differently, but also you don't start with an obsolete thing, with planned obsolescence. You don't start with garbage. You start with quality and then maintain quality over time. And I think that's how you start this whole conversation. Like if you have junk, get rid of it. If you have something of quality, great, maintain, repair, keep it alive, keep it going for as long as you possibly can.
Absolutely. And it's kind of tricky to be a good consumer in that way. I bought, maybe a dozen years ago, I bought a brand new washing machine. I'd never bought something that big before, other than a car. And I spent a lot of money on it. And it lasted for about 8 years. Mm-hmm. And I had to get a new one. Meanwhile, I still have the dryer that came with the house that I've been living in for 17 years.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just going and going and going. And I thought, so when I had to replace my washing machine, I did not buy a new one. I spent $200 buying one from the repair shop down the street.
Oh, great.
And I thought I will never buy a new one again. It's just not worth it.
Mm-hmm. That's
because
fascinating.
It doesn't last long enough.
And I think we try to do research, and their whole, consumer reports, there's always these places where you can theoretically do your research, right? And like read what thing is going to last longer. Was it in this book where he talks about washing machines too? Was there, I forget if it was.
I think he does. Yeah. Oh, yes. This is the place where they test washing machines and run them for years without stopping and put hockey pucks in the dryers.
Yeah, right. And he talks about like what brands, like, and their brands, like their companies are brands. And suddenly and it's sort of this weird part about I think it's in the washing machines where he talks about like, if you make one that's really good that never needs repair and no one needs to replace, it's hard to do as a company because you can only sell so many, because then everyone has one that wants one and no one needs to replace it or repair it or, get a new one. So you've run out of, people who can buy it, which in the US for washing machines is not the case. You're not going to run out of people, but suddenly you have to sell, like, just because something's more expensive doesn't mean it's better. But if you're making something better and it's more expensive, fewer people are going to buy it. You have fewer possible consumers for it. And then you're left with, well, do I buy this really good one that I know is going to last and really, like, it's an investment, like invest in a really expensive washing machine? Or do I go the route of this one came with my house and then it pooped out? Like, what's the next cheapest one I can buy that's going to, work good enough because I'm not, doing something fancy with my washing machine?
Yeah, well, I have really made a commitment to buying used in some situations. I've never owned a brand new car and I never intend to. It just seems crazy to me when there are so many millions of decent cars out there in the world.
Yeah, let alone like the depreciation. Like the day you buy it, you've just lost 30% of the money you paid 5 minutes earlier. Like it's
right, which is a considerable amount of money.
Yeah. Yeah.
And buying a used car, I actually was able last time to pay cash for a car. And I doubt there is a brand new car that I could pay cash for. Right. What's the cheapest new car? I don't know. I probably don't want it.
Yeah, exactly. Right. We don't necessarily want to, but we don't want the cheapest thing. We want the most useful for us thing. And, price is part of that for sure. And yet when he talks about, like Minter talks about clothing, our clothing is getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper to produce and lower and lower quality, that when you buy new clothing, it's just going to fall apart. Like you're going to see everything is not, you can't even do anything with it, and it's not going to last. And cool, it's the fast fashion industry. It's like, it looks great. It's on trend for now. Next season, next year, next whatever, it's not cool anymore. You don't want to wear it. You can't do anything with it. You've just like acquired some garbage, essentially. Like there's not much that can happen with it other than keep wearing it, but you don't want to because it's not cool.
Well, and I find that it's hard to find high quality stuff. So I used to shop at the Gap a lot. When I was in my 20s, I loved the Gap.
Okay.
And I bought wool sweaters and nice heavy cotton t-shirts and 100% cotton pants. And all that stuff lasted forever. I still have some of it. 25 years later. But if I go to the Gap right now, I doubt I can find a 100% cotton heavyweight t-shirt. They don't sell 100% wool sweaters. Like, I don't know where to go to find them. I'm sure they exist somewhere, but I think that we're talking about really high end. Whereas I used to be able to buy those things at a kind of a regular chain store.
Yeah. Yeah. Like your cotton t-shirt's like $50 now. Like, when did that happen? When you used to get whatever, a pack of 3 for $15, you know, or whatever it was, like just kind of your plain old shirt. Yeah, that is fascinating how things have changed, and that we, like, the items that we think of as quality are now specialty items, like cotton, like full, you know, whatever, natural fabrics, whatever these things are, those are somehow unique and special. And the flip side is Goodwill. I just, like, one of the stats that caught my eyes, that Goodwill does $4 billion of, you know, revenue per year, which out of a $17 million resale market. So Goodwill is like almost a quarter of all the reselling that happens in the US goes through Goodwill. I've definitely gone to Goodwill and found amazing things, found really trashy things, like whatever. It's kind of, but you don't know what you're going to get. Like, there's sort of this trade-off, right? I could Google around for 6 hours, find the perfect cotton t-shirt, buy it for $50, whatever, go get it shipped to me, whatever it is, or poke around Goodwill for 6 weeks and maybe come across this same shirt. Like, I don't know. Like, there's time and trade-off for that too, for sure.
Yeah. And I think Goodwill, I mean, at a certain point, it was hard to find really good things at Goodwill because resellers would go to Goodwill.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And like kind of sweep all the great stuff and then put it on their eBay site or something.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
So yeah, unless you're kind of there first thing in the morning when they're opening the doors.
Yeah, I think he talks about that in, my parents actually live in Tucson, and I've gone to Goodwill in Tucson because what do? You're visiting your parents, you head out to Goodwill, of course. And there were people, you could tell, the people there that are, and he mentions this in the book, that like Nogales is a town across the border in Mexico from basically closest to Tucson, you know, a little bit away. But the people go thrift shopping in the US, stock up on the stuff, drive it across the border, and then there's more of a market for it. People are more willing to buy, they can jack up the prices, whatever it is. It's profitable for people to thrift shop in the US and then sell in, like, literally across the border in Mexico for different items. And I think it's interesting. And I think people do that at garage sales. Like, I used to love, I haven't been to an actual, legit garage sale in some time. And that's sort of the subtitle of this book, right? Like, the global garage sale.
Yeah.
And I've found amazing things at garage sales. And now, I mean, I don't have a garage, but I think I don't know if garage sales are as good anymore, or estate sales, or, you know, just other things. Like, I wonder what you would find there. Like, every once in a while I see the sign for an estate sale or garage sale. I'm like, oh, I wonder, you know, I'm curious. I wonder what's going on over there. I wonder what they have. But yeah, I guess I'm not motivated enough to stop. I don't know. Maybe I just don't need I don't have time for the exploration, I guess.
Yeah. I had to stop myself at a certain point. I just stop cold turkey. Because I thought, unless there's something very specific I need, like a gardening tool or something, and I go and I look for that one thing, it's really too easy to be enticed by all these interesting things that you think you might do something with someday.
Yeah, no, it's true. I do remember the last garage sale I went to, it was because they listed a bunch of power tools that I actually needed. I'm like, oh yeah, I really need a Sawzall, a circular saw, and something else, because I had moved and I was building a bed, and they have the tools I need. I'm going to show up this is like the garage sale stalker style, where you show up before it opens. They open the door, you cruise in, grab all your stuff, and then suddenly, you end up with a couple other things. It's like, oh yeah, some bits for this and some more saw blades for that, whatever. But I think that was actually the last garage sale I went to. But it was because they listed the things I wanted. So it was not quite the sort of general browse experience. But it's an experience. I mean, people enjoy the experience of window shopping, garage sale shopping, doing whatever, looking for cool stuff or bargains or deals or amazing finds. They're out there, I'm sure.
Right. And I would say, when I was young, when I was in my 20s and first furnishing my home, yard sale was a great place to do that. Goodwill was a great place to do that. But by the time I was in my 40s, I did not need anything really. I needed very specific things. And I thought, oh, now it's just retail therapy, and that is not useful to me at all.
Right. I love that term, the term retail therapy, right? I feel like another, I don't know, I should consult the world. I feel like that's a very American, thought process. Like, oh, I'll feel good if I go shopping. If I acquiring things feels good as an American, as a person. So I need to go out there and hunt for the things and find them and get them into my life. That's a very satisfying experience. When in reality, should it be? Is that really a great way to meet your needs, I guess, for feeling self-actualized? Questionable maybe.
I think it's a little questionable. In fact, I'd said, so when I talk to people who love to shop, I don't really love to shop. I kind of hate to shop, honestly.
No, that makes you
Some
better at your
people
job.
really do like it and they're good at it. And I said, if you're really good at it, why don't you go find the best deal you can possibly find on winter jackets, get your friends to chip in $100 and buy them for foster kids or something. I mean, there is a way to buy things intentionally and to a good purpose instead of just sort of feathering your nest to the point where there's no room for you anymore. Right?
Yeah. So how many winter jackets do you need? Probably not 8, most likely. I think there's also, and there's something you said for the sort of entrepreneurial bent of like buying things and then reselling, right? I think that's like that's a job people have, reselling on Craigslist, on, Amazon. You can resell to other spaces and do something, you can make money this way. It's very possible. And I think, I don't know, I wonder sometimes if that's like one of the sort of like vice industries of the US is reselling, right? Like, oh, I bought this stuff really low. It's maybe I know I can get a good price for it. So I'm going to flip it, flipping houses, flipping whatever, any kind of clothing items I think often gets flipped, or just other memorabilia, whatever stuff that, and there's obviously pawn shop industry. Like there's plenty of places where that's like the point is to flip things, and plenty of people do it individually. And I think there are things that people collect. Like there are people that they want that rare book or that rare, thing, whatever. There are collectors out there. And I think there are plenty of people that are just out to make a buck, which welcome to America. Like I'm going to buy 5 winter coats because I found a great sale, flip them all for $20 more. Maybe that's worth it to me. I've just made $100.
Yeah. I mean, it is an age old occupation, I guess, right?
Right.
People doing that for thousands of years. Yeah. I think and that part doesn't seem as troublesome to me as the just buying stuff you don't need because it's fun to buy. That's the part I think we've become addicted to, just buying for the sake of buying.
Right.
Which is interesting because most people feel like they don't really have enough money.
Yeah.
Money and time, right, are the kind of 2 commodities you can never have too much of. Well, that's arguable, but we won't get into the billionaire thing. But I think, if you're committed to being financially independent, why are you spending hundreds and hundreds of dollars on little pieces of junk that you're never going to use?
Right. And I think I'm sure your people, I bet they're like, oh, but I needed it. Oh, it was important to me. Oh, it was nostalgic to me. It was, we're great at justifying our acquisitions. Like we're so good at this. Like we're amazingly good at this. And yet we can part with some of them. And then they get into this beautiful, not beautiful secondhand system that is not really functional or great. Yeah, there's definitely something we said for, trying to do it right the first time, getting the right thing, maintaining, whatever, having less, like very un-American, sentiment to have less of anything. But I think there's value in all these different ways of looking at how we operate. And I think Adam Minter would say, yeah, like this is not going well. Like we are just burying ourselves in our own secondhand items, which are actually garbage, but we think it's not going well out there.
Yeah. One of the things that really struck me, I think it was at that Tucson Goodwill, one of the people who works there says that they get thousands of clothing hangers every day, thousands of them. And they wrap them up and resell them. And she said, we don't need any more hangers in the world. And I thought, oh, that's so true. I mean, there are just millions of them everywhere. And yet, if you need hangers, are you going to go to Goodwill and buy the used ones? Or are you going to go to IKEA and buy new ones, or Target or something?
Fancy ones, right? Nice ones.
Oh, yes. Or fancier ones. Yeah. It's so interesting. And I think that's kind of true of most things. I mean, we just don't need that much more of anything.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I think, and I have definitely gone to I've been in this place where I moved or whatever. I'm like, oh, I somehow don't have hangers, or I need more. And I have gone to Goodwill for hangers because they're so cheap. You can get like whatever, like an basically a bushel of hangers for $2, like whatever it is, some absurd quantity that maybe I think they actually probably package them a little more sensibly than that. But it is possible. And there's I think part of this just speaks to what we value and what we don't value. Do my hangers need to be new? Like if you just sit back and think about it, you're like, no, they just need to hold up the clothes. They need to work. But then what do I do with them? That's interesting. I forgot about the part where the Goodwill gets thousands a day, and they just they have to do something with them. That would be an item functional, you can bundle up 10 or 20 or whatever, sell them for $1. Like, cool. Those might move through maybe, but I think they're also like, we have too many. Like, we can't actually get rid of 1,000 hangers a day, even though we get in 1,000 hangers a day. Like, there's too many for us to deal with. I bet they end up, I don't know what they said from that. If they end up recycling or trashing or what they do.
They must end up throwing a lot away. I mean, there's just, what are you going to do? Because their warehouse is going to start to be nothing but coat hangers.
Yeah. Probably won't meet their needs fundamentally.
And this is why it does make sense, I think, to be thoughtful about where your donations go, So I like to give things to agencies that give those things directly to people who need them. And when you think about it, if somebody doesn't have a lot of clothing and they're getting donated clothing, might they not also need those coat hangers, right?
Sure.
The hangers to put them on or the drawers to put them in. And so I think there's something about being able to just hand it straight to the person. And I also think, if somebody gives you something, does it seem more valuable than if you pick it up on the shelf at Goodwill? And I'm curious about that because I'm thinking, if my sister tells me, oh, I've got all these extra hangers, do you want them? I might be more inclined to say yes than to go buy them at a thrift store. Somehow, like if I know where they came from, they feel better.
Well, you think would feel better because they're coming from your sister specifically, or because your sister doesn't need them and you can use them? Like, I guess I'm curious to what part of
I think both. I think I think that sometimes the thrift store has a tiny bit of an ick factor, when it comes to
that's true. Sometimes
new stuff and you don't know who's been touching it or where, were they smoking or whatever, And I think, but if it comes from your friend's house or your neighbor's house, somehow it feels like it's of better quality just because you know where it came from.
Yeah. Well, and I guess we think our friends have good taste or have good things. Like, I think if we value our friends, we probably like some of that rubs off on their possessions. If they give us their possessions, we're like, oh yeah, they're cool. They're my friend. Obviously their stuff is cool. Awesome.
I read this amazing article a couple of years ago about a couple in their 70s who were moving out of the apartment they'd lived in for 35 years or something. And they were downsizing, moving into maybe assisted living. So they had a party and they put stickers on all the things they wanted to take with them, and everything else was up for grabs. And they had this day-long party. They invited the neighborhood. They invited all their old friends, and people could take whatever they wanted. And I thought, that's so beautiful. I mean, I would love that. I'd love to go to somebody's house and take one thing that reminded me of them and was something that I could use. And I thought it was such a cool way of unloading a lot of things before you end up just hauling the rest of them off to the thrift store.
Yeah.
It's much more fun than a yard sale where you're probably not going to make that much money anyway. And it feels like a big chore and not that much fun. Like, why not open a couple bottles of champagne and burn some cookies and make a huge party out of it?
That just sounds like really good branding for their stuff. Their stuff giveaway was a party then, and suddenly it was a little more festive and more fun. I like that spirit of too, like, maybe this will remind me of you. Maybe you can use it. We're friends. You know the person. It seems like a little closer than a stranger's yard sale or garage sale. Or Goodwill, which is even another layer of sort of stranger, like mysterious stranger out there you don't even know.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, part of the reason we like things we've inherited is because they remind us of the people who used to own them. And I think it's always great if you can inherit something that is inherently useful rather than something that you're going to put on a shelf and never look at again. But we were talking about China. I inherited the sort of fine china that we used for holidays when I was growing up. And it's our everyday dishes. That's what we use. Great. And we've broken a few and I go, well, who cares? Like I'd rather use them and break them than sort of put them on a shelf and never look at them again. Yeah.
I think there's a different way of displaying your possessions, right? And there are people that do and people that don't. And there's different ways to sort of, do these things. And there's like this whole industry of like plate hangers and racks and ways to display your plates, right? Because they're very fancy. You want everyone to see that you have the fine china. And so you have to display these things. I don't know if I know anyone who has plates hanging, like decorative, like the fine china, like the sort of plates hanging or displaying their house as a sign of, look at this like amazing, sign of wealth, essentially, or a sign of like class, a sign of class. Maybe that's a better way to say it. Versus, hey, I got this ironic plate that says, State Fair, and I hang it up. And you're like,
right. Yeah. Yeah. Now, when I was growing up, we had plates on the wall. They were sort of platters. It was this whole set of blue and white, I don't know, something probably fancy, Wedgwood or something. And yeah, I don't know whatever happened to those, but that's funny. I think that maybe that was more common in the 70s than it is now.
Well, yeah, there's lots of different like style changes, taste change, but like a plate is going to hold your food. Like that's not like the functionality of the thing isn't going to change. So yeah, why not use them? And yeah.
I think as a modern culture, we also like to replace things a lot. So my mother had her sort of everyday china that she got as a wedding present. And she, after 40 some years, a lot of it had broken and the pattern was discontinued. And she was really bummed because she would have loved to buy more of it and just keep it going. And I thought, we don't really do that so much anymore. Most people don't buy something and assume that these are the plates I'm going to use for the rest of my life. I mean, I will say, I have a short attention span. I'm like, oh, I'm kind of done with these. These are boring. Let me get something interesting and new. You know, I've had several sets of dishes in my life already, you know, and I think, oh yeah, we don't want to just buy one thing and stick with it. We want new and different and new and different.
Yeah. Right. I think this is sort of one of the problems of modern existence. And we love the new thing. We love different things. We love change, you know, variety in different ways. And yet like the biggest seller of like IKEA's dishware is like the most plain, boring set possible. Like it's like,
I have that.
like the sort of beigey, you know, gray. And you're like, okay, it's like totally designed to be utilitarian. There's nothing flashy about it. You can put it anywhere. Like it's, I think it's sort of this, and I think we were talking before about the idea of quality and nostalgia and attachment and to our possessions. We value them. We think they're amazing. Obviously someone else wants this amazing thing. No, they don't. Use it. I mean, you're probably better off using and breaking your dishes than trying to sell or recycle or upcycle them. Like I think they would spend more time in a warehouse or in a landfill if you tried to donate them, I suspect.
Yeah, I think it's possible. I think another thing is that we have a declining birth rate here in the West, right? So, I mean, if you had 10 kids and those 10 kids were splitting up your possessions, everybody's going to get a few things. But if, like in my family, you have 2 sets of grandparents funneling down to two humans,
right.
6 or however many sets of grandparents, you know, then it's harder to know what to do with all that stuff. Like there just aren't as many people inheriting.
Yeah. And I think I actually had this interesting conversation with one of my neighbors who lives down the way. And she was talking about how she's had pets. And so she has the ashes of all of her pets. Oh. And she was like saying, well, I wonder what's going to happen with all these ashes when I die. And the response from the person I was with was, they're just going to get thrown out. And she's like, oh, no, that will never happen. I'm like, who would want the ashes from your pets? I don't know.
I mean, I don't even want my own pet's ashes, let alone
There people are sentimental about different things, but I'm like, probably literally no one. Like, yeah. But she was like aghast that no one would want the ashes of her pets. I'm like, what scenario would someone want the ashes? What scenario would anyone want the ashes of someone else's pets? Like, I don't know.
Right. Well, so I think this is part of this whole thing is that we have these sentimental attachments to things, which makes us think that they are somehow inherently valuable, right? Mm-hmm. Because I love it, it has value. Like it has value to you and possibly no one else on the planet. I mean, which is okay.
Yeah. Well, I think you spoke to this before too, of like not burdening your children with possessions that you know that they clearly don't want. Like the family heirloom, you know, the china cabinet. Like I don't have china. Don't give me a china cabinet. The family heirloom china cabinet that I have no desire or need for. And giving, you know, I think that many, some older adults are like, well, this is so valuable to me. Obviously my kids, grandkids, you know, someone will want this or need it, but it's really, you were just passing a burden on to other people. Like your examples of, you know, Minter's examples of like, cool, we try to recycle, we try to sell it, we try to do whatever, we try to push it out into a different system that is rickety, or we can deal with it better, you know, on the front end, or we can leave it to our kids and they'll be pushing it out into the sort of rickety secondhand system down the road. I don't know, bonfires? Like, I don't know what the actual solution is.
Yeah, I was thinking about that, about all that wooden furniture that's sitting in warehouses. I mean, should we just be burning it for fuel or something? Well, I think this is a good reason to do the decluttering yourself and not make your kids do it. There's this book, Sweetest Swedish death cleaning. I cannot recommend that book. I really didn't like it, but I liked the concept.
Okay, great. A non-recommendation. Perfect. Thanks for not recommending it. But tell me about the concept then that you liked.
The concept is before you die, get rid of all your stuff so your kids don't have to do it, right? Figure out what they want, what's valuable and interesting to them. Maybe just give it to them now. Don't make them wait, until you're gone. And then leave this earth with very few possessions, and you won't be burdening your kids.
Right.
They won't have to go through it for you.
Or you build a gigantic tomb and you take it all with you.
Right. There we go.
There's another alternative. I think that's like the whatever ancient Egyptian style that is not reality anymore.
That's an interesting concept. Just take it with you.
Yeah. Bury it with you? Weird. Yeah. I think, well, and that really, I think we're also, as Americans, very bad at talking about death, or very bad at dealing with planning for, all of that. And I think the idea of doing that in a way that, like, your friends that were moving, they had this celebration, or, if you actually engage with this, like, oh, the stuff that my family members might actually want, I'm going to give it to them now and see them enjoy it now, is very, like, a little more palatable to the American who's afraid of death and dying and won't write a will and won't do whatever and will just give the kids or grandkids like the privilege / duty / burden of cleaning out the house, after mom and dad die, or after, grandparents die. Like it's a burden to many folks.
It is. It really is. I mean, I cannot tell you how many people I know who are really struggling with what to do with their parents' stuff. Mm-hmm. And even if it's not a matter of should I keep it or should I not, again, it's, well, I don't want to keep it, but what can I do with it? It's tough.
Yeah.
I think there are a lot of sort of move management companies now, or I think Adam Minter talked to a bunch of people who run these, like, clearing out the house for you. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the greatest, right? Because, if you just reach that point where you're like, I don't know what to do with it, hire someone who does. Yeah. Hire someone who's not going to struggle with making those decisions and can just get it all managed for you.
Yeah. I think people try to go the estate sale route and no one actually wants to buy it. Like the estate sale people that run those are like, no, this isn't worth it. Like to me, I'm not gonna make enough money to show up and sell your stuff that no one wants. So you're on your own.
And there's this nostalgia factor. I think he talks about that too, about the nostalgia. So I worked with a family once, and they had a big garage that was completely full of stuff. And the back half was their parents' stuff, and the front half was their kids' stuff. Oh. So their children were in college, but they had so much stuff from their youth. I mean, hundreds of toys and art supplies and knickknacks and this and that and the other. And some of them they were sure they could get some money for if they put them on eBay. And so it was just this really interesting thing. I thought, oh, you're so caught in this kind of weird time warp where you can't let go of your children's childhoods and you can't let go of your parent. It's just like clinging. And I'm like, your kids aren't kids anymore, and your parents aren't here anymore. And holding on to all of their stuff is never going to bring back. It's never going to bring it back, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. And it doesn't serve you in the present if you actually maybe would prefer to put your car in the garage or do something, use that space as a workshop or, in a different functional way than storage. When I think he talks about the storage epidemic in the US, so like having like self-storage spaces is like a very American phenomena, and they are everywhere. Like if you drive around, to a not as, tightly congested area, suddenly it's self-storage, they're just all over the place.
There's one just up the street from me, like tucked in at the back of the neighborhood. They are everywhere. It's crazy.
Yeah. We can't get rid of it, but we're going to pay to store it and then, I don't know, make a TV show out of it later. Like it's just such a weird phenomena that we...
And I think one of the things that clutter, and this kind of clutter really robs us of, is time. If you have a storage area, at some point you're going to have to go spend days or weeks, dealing with all that stuff. And then you've got to deal with all the stuff in the garage and in your basement and this and that. And wouldn't you rather be doing other things with your weekends than...
Well, I think people would rather, so they avoid it. But that's why you're here, to help people not avoid it. Yeah, absolutely. Well, we should actually wrap up this conversation. We've been talking a long time. Do you have any last points or thoughts or ideas that we haven't gotten to, that, things that struck you from this book?
I think mainly just this concept that we need to be more thoughtful about what we're buying and what we're using. And if, before you pick that up and put it in your grocery cart, really think about whether it's going to add value to your life or if it's just or maybe think about what's the end state of this thing.
Mm-hmm.
What's going to happen to this in the end? And if it's going to end up in the ocean, maybe decide not to buy it.
That is great. Not just does it give me value now, like what is the full life cycle of this thing?
Yeah,
That's
the full life cycle of the thing.
Fantastic. Well, thanks so much, Julia Williamson, for coming in to talk with me today and talk about this fun book. Thanks for being excited about it. I love it.
Oh, thank you. This was so much fun.
Awesome. We'll see you.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Books Applied podcast. I hope you enjoyed getting to know a new book and learning how to apply its ideas to make your work, sport, or life a little bit more awesome. For more leadership education-related content, including conflict management checklists, invitations to a fun free lunch that happens monthly, upcoming classes, webinars, and mastermind groups, please head over to wslleadership.com. Thanks, and have a great day.